9th August 2024. When this news first broke out, आप कहाँ पे थे sir and what exactly was happening with you?
In my lifetime, and probably even in the lifetime of people who are far more senior to me, the state, the country has never seen anything like this before. As the news started filtering in, the initial information was there was a young lady, a trainee in the department who had committed suicide. And then, of course, by evening, the whole city had sat up because the shocking news of the rape and murder had reached us by then.
Do you think that this crime could have been done only by one person?
It is almost impossible that a single person can cause so much of bruising and battering.
If there wasn't so much of a public outcry in this case, this would have been labeled as suicide and that's it, case closed.
You spoke about the resident doctors, we have spoken about senior doctors, we've talked about nurses, healthcare workers, we'll talk about the community as a whole. They have stood up together for justice and appealing against what has gone on in the state, and that I think is a huge achievement for people of the state, and I feel proud of my state and city, at least on this particular avenue.
What should be justice for Abhay?
I want, all of us want, the country wants that people who committed the heinous crime, but equally people who planned it, people who executed it together, people who wiped the evidence away are equally culpable as the person who hands-on did it.
Hello everyone, Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, Salam Alaikum, and welcome to one more episode of DTalks with Dr. Kapil. Today we are in Kolkata, the city of joy. मेरे लिए पर्सनली कोलकाता में जो क्रिकेट जो मुझे पसंद है तो वो है सौरव गांगुली, जिसको प्यार से कहते हैं द प्रिंस ऑफ कोलकाता. लेकिन टुडे हमारे स्टूडियो में वीव गॉट द प्रिंस ऑफ पल्मोलॉजी ऑफ आवर कंट्री, द लवेबल डॉक्टर राजा धर सर. And we are very fortunate that sir has removed time from his busy schedule and he's come to our studio and he's going to be talking about the gruesome, the horrific incident in RG Kar Medical College. How this incident shook the conscience of the entire country. Let's hear it from Dr. Raja Dhar. Please watch this episode. So, hello Dr. Raja Dhar sir. Thank you so much. मैं जानता हूँ कि आप बहुत बिजी हो, but you've removed time to come on this podcast. Thank you so very much.
Pleasure, thank you.
Sir, we are in Kolkata, city of joy. You know, I've got a lot of memories of Kolkata. मेरे बचपना यहाँ पे था in a place known as Baliganj,
right,
not very far from here. While there's a lot of positivity, you know, but पिछले 3 months से I feel that the mood in this city, especially the medical fraternity, has taken a turn, unfortunately, for the worse. And you know that I'm talking about the RG Kar medical case. So, sir, I would like to take you back in time, 9th August 2024. When this news first broke out, आप कहाँ पे थे, sir, and what exactly was happening with you?
So, Kapil, I paused because it still sends a chill down my spine. जब मैं सोचता हूँ, it does that to me. So, I was at work as expected. So, I work in the CMRI hospital, which is in the center of Kolkata, a place called Alipur. So I was at work, I was doing my intensive care ward rounds. When the first bit of information started filtering in, this would have been what, about 10:30, 11 in the morning. And you know, the official informations didn't come till late afternoon. So these were more of WhatsApp messages, some phone calls. You know, this lady was from our fraternity. She was a respiratory physician. So
Correct.
The information coming in was also from some of her colleagues, trainees who worked in the same department, but they were very scattered bits of information which would worry you, which would make you feel anguished. There were strange sentiments going on because in my lifetime, and probably even in the lifetime of people who are far more senior to me, the state, the country has never seen anything like this before.
True.
And maybe we'll have a chat about why that is, why we are saying that. But as the news started filtering in, the initial information was there was a young lady, a trainee in the department who had committed suicide. And then there were talks about this not being a suicide but more. And then, of course, by evening, the whole city had sat up because the shocking news of the rape and murder had reached us by then. What were my thoughts then? I think if I go back in time, I was numbed. I think I was actually too shocked to think rationally at the time. I did not know what was going on. There was a degree of anger in me. I think there was a part of me which was very angry, which thought, why did this have to happen in a medical college, in a hospital, in an institute where someone was doing an on-call, was doing their duty, and which would relatively be a safe haven. A part of me also thought, what were we coming to? A country which has made phenomenal progress was still languishing in the dark ages where a young lady did not have safety of any degree within a hospital. So I think there were various sentiments going on in my head, various other doctors, healthcare workers across the city and then across the country. But like I said, it still sends a chill down my spine. And I hope I don't have to relive those days again ever for any other event.
Fingers crossed. I hope none of us actually have to, again, ever encounter such an incident. But, sir, as much as I know you and as much my colleagues also know you, you're more of a private person, work a lot, you're more into academics and all this. You are not much into social media. That's one thing which I've observed about you. But 9th August in the night, I saw 2 huge Facebook posts. So, जो emotions आप describe कर रहे थे, was it an outpouring of all those emotions on Facebook?
It was, I thought. So I think along with the sentiments that I described a little while ago, there was also a degree of guilt involved. A degree of guilt involved not because of any direct involvement from my side or our side, but more because I felt partly responsible that a girl from my fraternity in my city, where I had by choice come back to work, had actually suffered the way she had. A sense of guilt because parents who had sent her to a medical college to study, and the background, this lady does not live in Kolkata proper, comes from the suburbs, she's the only doctor in the family. So there was a feeling of letting down the parents and the family. And there was also this worry about people roaming around in the hospital campus who had not been identified, who had been involved in this gruesome incident. So it was a bit of all of these, and I felt responsible in that I should convey my thoughts across to my fellow brethren, to my colleagues, to my friends, to people who were younger to me, older to me, and who should all come forward and try and find an iota of justice in what was going on at the time. It was still fresh. We did not know what was happening. We just knew that there was rape and murder. That's it. And as things looked at the time, it seemed to be a group of people who had committed the crime rather than being one person. So I think all those thoughts crossed my mind. I felt responsible. I felt it was up to me, being one of the more senior clinicians in the city, to sit down and pen down my thoughts. Maybe pen is not the right word, but to express my thoughts on social media. You're right. I'm not at all a social media person. I don't put posts out. I don't have the time to do it, to be honest. And B, I don't feel I want to project myself on social media the way a lot of my colleagues do. And that's not to say they do anything wrong, but that's not just me. But here I think there was a sense of responsibility which crept in. And I thought it was my responsibility to express my thoughts and let other people know what I thought about the incident.
Agreed. So I think all of us shared, the sense of helplessness and all the emotions which you are describing. It was a very confusing day. But let me just go slightly back. See what happens now, sir, when we are in the same city, same subject, कोई ना कोई conference होता है, एक CME होता है. So you know each other in the same city. Similarly, कभी ऐसे हुआ है कि in Kolkata, you have somehow seen this girl, interacted with this girl, known this girl from some previous CME or something like that?
हाँ जी कपिल, तो I mean, you have probably also seen this girl. तो आपको पता है हम लोग ये वायु प्लेटफॉर्म के अंडर काफी प्रोग्राम्स करते थे. You've been a part of those. So she was a trainee doctor. So she attended most of them, if not all of them.
Okay.
Right. Now, she was a very nice, quiet girl when I have known her. And to be honest, she was not one you would actually notice and remember in the long term.
Got it.
However, when I saw her photographs going back, I knew who she was. I had spoken to her on multiple occasions. That was also a bit of a shock to the system. It is not as if knowing her makes the crime any less or more heinous. But if you can relate to the person, if you know that person personally, I think the shock that you get, the sense of ownership, the sense of responsibility that comes along with it, वो ज़्यादा खटकता है दिल में.
I
And
agree.
that was one of the things which made the event even more shocking for me.
So आपने जो ये वर्ड्स जो यूज किया ना, रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी जो है, ओनरशिप जो है, अगेन आई वांट टू आस्क यू, बिकॉज शी वाज इन द सेम फ्रेटर्निटी, आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट द मेडिकल फ्रेटर्निटी, बट फ्रॉम respiratory medicine, do you feel that you had more of an ownership personally in this particular case?
हाँ कपिल, मुझे पता नहीं है होना चाहिए या नहीं चाहिए, बट होता तो है फॉर श्योर. आई थिंक इफ यू आर फ्रॉम द सेम स्पेशलिटी, if you see each other at meetings, if you teach someone, if you learn from someone, interact with someone, the shock that you get from an event like this is even greater. I think the fact that she belonged to our respiratory family, our respiratory community, gives you a sense of ownership, a sense of feeling together. She was a part of our state conferences where she came and presented papers, where I have been a judge. So all of these factors, I think, played on my mind when I thought about the incident again and again in my own head.
Obviously, a lot of raw emotions coming out even now when you're talking. Like, you know, I've got this thought process. The worst part in this entire incident, according to me, is, see, if we go back to our own residencies, I can understand that education, academics is a part of it, but we've also had a lot of fun. You know, you've had colleagues, you've had so many memories. The worst part, according to me, was this female जो पढ़ रही थी अपने खुद के college में, खुद के department में, which you and me consider to be like a safe haven, you know, for us, where we can chill, we can relax. This sinister, gruesome incident has taken place in the safe haven. Do you agree with me on this statement?
So, Kapil, I couldn't agree more with you. You know, so, I mean, safe haven, yes, but even more, it's home for us. आप जब पढ़ते हो कहीं पे जाते हो, कुछ लोग तो हॉस्टल में रहते हैं, कुछ लोग ज़्यादातर हॉस्टल में रहते हैं, वो अपना घर होता है.
Correct.
और आप शायद अपने ट्रेनिंग ईयर्स में उस अस्पताल में, उस डिपार्टमेंट में, उन कमरों में ज़्यादा टाइम बिताते हो एज कम्पेयर टू वॉट यू डू एट होम. For even day scholars, you probably go home to sleep. The rest of the time you spend at work. And then when you're on night shifts, which are enormously long, so 36 hours, as was the case with the lady in question, you think of this as home. And the question of safety would not occur when you're at home.
Exactly.
जिसको आप घर समझते हो, आप तो सोचोगे ही नहीं कि ये सेफ हेवन है, अनसेफ नहीं, क्योंकि वो तो घर है. और घर में सेफ्टी का कोई क्वेश्चन ही नहीं है. So I couldn't agree more with you. I think what pinches us, what makes it more shocking, what sort of makes you sit up and think, what is the world coming to, is the fact that your home, the so-called safe haven of your workplace, the very inside the innermost sanctum sanatorium of your department, your seminar room, is no longer safe for you. And not only not safe for you, an incident as heinous and grievous as this can happen there without anyone knowing who the culprits were.
I agree. So your home has been breached.
Correct.
It's like this false sense of security that, you know, so many of us have. In many ways, this incident has really scarred a lot of us. So if I could just request you to just mention very briefly whatever you know about the postmortem report which had come out.
So, Kapil, I'll tell you the challenge with the postmortem report. The first report that got issued was a handwritten report, and that was circulated and recirculated, and you must have seen it. It came on social media, maybe on every WhatsApp post there was, and there were multiple injuries mentioned on it. The second report that came in, that was supposed to be more official, also had a lot of differences with the initial report, and no one could explain why that was. I think the common factor was that starting from the head to the toe, there was not a single bit of the body which was not battered and bruised, right? So you think of the eyes, you think of the nose, you think of the neck, you think of the chest wall, the ribs, abdomen. I think the lady was violated in every bit of our body. And while we speak about rape, the battering, the bruising that she received in every bit of the body makes you wonder how someone or some people can actually be as cruel as this in killing someone. So the killing of a person is the killing of a person. However, ये जो क्रूएल्टी है, ये जो आपने किया है ऐसा क्राइम, तो वो आपने क्या सोच के किया है विद इन अ हॉस्पिटल फॉर अ डॉक्टर हु इज डूइंग हर जॉब एंड नथिंग मोर देन दैट इज समथिंग विच I will probably never have an answer to. So I know I've not gone into the depths of what you asked me, Kapil. And a part of the reason is A, I don't remember the exact details. And B, because I think we don't have a proper report. But I think it's suffice to say that every bit of her body, this young lady, was actually violated by whoever did the crime.
In fact, so one of the reasons why I'm obviously not looking at the exact wordings and everything, but जो आपने mention किया that every single organ, part of her body, unfortunately was violated. It was a gruesome, heinous crime. Which is what was so surprising was that when one person was singled out and, called the perpetrator of this crime. But, very honestly, and I know that CBI is on this. I know that law agencies, the courts are doing their own work. Yes, I understand that. But I want to ask you, in your opinion, do you think that this crime could have been done only by one person?
तो कपिल, ये मैंने पहले भी बोला है. I have spoken about this in interviews and I'll say it again. We are talking about the case that has been extensively investigated across courts and across lawyers. We've got more than 100 lawyers in court fighting this. So at the time when I spoke about this, I had said that it is almost impossible that a single person can cause so much of bruising and battering. Having said that, the investigations being carried out by the highest investigative authority in the country has not revealed anyone who's actively participated in the act aside from the single person who has been arrested and convicted till now. However, if you tell me as a doctor, as a human being, as a person, I would say it again. I think it's nearly impossible that a single person without any help would be able to hold down a girl, hand and feet, and then penetrate, rape, violate a lady, and cause the degree of brutality, the bruising that we have just described, single-handedly. It would, and the girl we're talking about was a well-built girl. She would have been strong. She would have resisted. So I am not sure how a single person would have done it, but I would wait to hear what the CBI and other investigative authorities say about it.
I completely agree with the last statement. I mean, we are still looking for answers. We are still waiting for justice, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we will get to it. I'll come to justice a bit later. Like you mentioned in the beginning, there was one handwritten report, then there was one more report printed. And, see, we were not in Kolkata at that point of time. So probably your sources would have been on the ground. You would have had a much reliable source or something. But when we were far away in different cities, the thing was absolutely perpetrated that this is a suicide. That's it. And I remember there was also hurried cremation done in this case so that a lot of traces and, proofs and all would not, be available or would vanish. Do you think that if there wasn't so much of a public outcry in this case, this would have been labeled as suicide and that's it, case closed?
So, Kapil, I'll answer your question, but before that, let's take a step back. You think about the events as they have been described officially now in the court of law, right? So this I can say officially. So we know that this girl died in the early hours of the morning. We know that the death was not declared till about 5.5 hours after that. We know for a fact that it was initially declared to be a suicide. We also know that the parents, having received a phone call from the hospital, came in to see the girl who knew was dead, and they were not allowed to see the girl for about 3.5 hours after that. We also know that when they went across to the police station to file an FIR, they were actually detained in the police station for a few hours. We know that the girl had a hurried postmortem past 6 p.m., which is not something which is done in this state and city. Hurried postmortem and sent away for cremation, and the body was lying in the hearse van outside her home, which was locked because her parents were at the police station. You tell me, if there was no question of tampering of evidence, wiping of evidence, why would it take so long? And why would certain sections where it should have taken long actually been shortened to what it was? So the time periods are exactly the reverse way around. Morning, the death should have been declared immediately. The parents should have been called in. The parents should have been shown their girl. Evening, the postmortem should have probably happened the next day, because you would have managed to glean all the evidence, taken all the fingerprints, done everything. The cremation would have been done even later, and that was hurried. So there was obviously evidence tampering, and there's a couple of people who've been arrested because of evidence tampering with the conviction being related to the rape and murder.
Okay.
Now, take another step back and think about it. If there's only one person who's a civic volunteer, worked with the police, why would you need to tamper with evidence so much? Why would you need to arrest two people?
Agreed.
Why would you need to defend a civic volunteer who interestingly got convicted within 24 hours of doing the deed? And it was as if there was proof laid in front of you everywhere. The CC cameras caught it. There were fingerprints everywhere. There was semen which was available. And so if you are tampering with evidence, why would so much of evidence in favor of one person getting arrested be left behind in almost a deluge? True. And no other evidence available? So I think we have not... So this is me hypothesizing, and this is not me trying to point fingers, and this is not me trying to politicize issues. However, I think we don't know the whole truth as yet. I have full reliance on the investigative authorities and the judicial system in this country. You said fingers crossed. I will cross my fingers too. मुझे लगता है कि we will see light, we will see evidence to a certain extent, and we will have justice to a certain extent. We need to wait. The courts of law, the judicial system takes time in every country, as also ours. But I think there's much more to this story as compared to what we have heard till now.
सर, आपने एक इंटरेस्टिंग वर्ड बोला. आपने बोला वी हैव टू वेट, लेकिन अनफॉर्चुनेटली वही है, जस्टिस डिलेड is in a way justice denied. Sure. And I really hope that the investigative authorities at least fasten their work. At least we need so many answers, because like you mentioned, there are so many loopholes. Sure. All we want are answers. Let's hope we get it. And at this junction, I can only remember the interview which the parents had. You could see the pain in their eyes, the sorrow. And, we owe it to them. Sure. We owe it to all of us as well. So let's hope that we get some answers soon.
Sure.
मैं sorrow की बात किया उनके parents के आंखों से. I want to somehow get this sorrow on and see other aspects of society and how they have responded to this entire case. So I'll first start with the resident doctors. I can only understand, ये तो कितना shocking है. One of your co-resident इतने case में brutally rape और heinous एक case हुआ है. First of all, I don't know how they took it, because it will psychologically be a huge battering for them. But what was your opinion with regards to the resident doctors of Arjikar Medical College and their response?
So I think the most challenging group of people, you talked about various groups of people, and I'm sure you will talk about each group individually. But out of all groups, the group which found it the most challenging was probably her colleagues in the same department. Because we have talked about the so-called threat culture, which has become the now in word in the vocabulary of Bengali and maybe across the state and country. But it was not as if this had happened for this particular individual and the threat culture had not happened before that. So, and again, this is me hypothesizing. I don't think we've got facts till now. But it would be very improbable that these guys knew nothing about the existing threat culture. And there's a lot of people within that community of trainees who have come forward and talked about how the threat culture was rampant in their department in every aspect. And again, there's been multiple people arrested because of the ongoing threat cultures, promotions being gifted to people, people being transferred into big institutes on the payment of money, bio wastes being exported anew. So the fact that this was all happening within departments, within hospitals, would not have been known to the postgraduate trainees. So you will ask me, Kapil, कि ये लोगों ने कभी बोला क्यों नहीं? तो बोला नहीं शायद इसी थ्रेट कल्चर के कारण कि वो डरते हैं.
I think एक डर रहेगा, exactly.
Correct. And it is a possibility that a lot of these people, some of these people, would know more about this incident as compared to what has been said till date.
Correct.
क्योंकि डर तो अभी भी है ना? ऐसा नहीं है कि 3 लोगों के, 4 लोगों के, 5 लोगों के अरेस्ट हो जाने से थ्रेट कल्चर निकल गया है.
True.
This is a wide-ranging thing which probably involves multiple hospitals, multiple institutes across the state, maybe even across the country. We don't know.
सर अनफॉर्चुनेट एस्पेक्ट जिसमें एंड शायद से लोग ये नहीं जानते रहेंगे और दे डोंट पे अटेंशन टू दिस फैक्ट इज रेसिडेंसी. अनफॉर्चुनेटली इट्स अ फ्लोटिंग पॉपुलेशन. सो यू आर देयर फॉर 3 years एंड सबके मन में वही रहता है कि देखो जो भी कल्चर है जस्ट अडेप्ट, गेट योर डिग्री, पास द एग्जाम एंड गो. सो आई थिंक एक तरफ से डर वो भी रहेगा कि वाई टू हैम्पर ऑल ऑफ दिस, यू नो, जस्ट गेट अ डिग्री एंड गो. सो देयर माइट बी, जैसे आप बोल रहे हो, लॉट ऑफ प्रेशर ऑन देम.
Sure.
Have you personally spoken to any of her co-residents, seniors or juniors after this incident?
Sure. So I have, and I'll relate an interesting story, Kapil, which probably you know of, but I'll still speak about it. So I have spoken to multiple people because as a part of their training, they have come to my institute to study. So I know them personally and I have a bond with them. I have a relation with them. I've spoken to multiple people and then I've spoken to them formally because our national conference, NAPCON, we had planned in Kolkata before this grievous incident happened. And I called them to my unit in CMRI to have a discussion because they were unhappy. Maybe unhappy is not the right word, but they had their apprehensions about holding a national conference in the city when the entire city was grieving and demanding justice. And I, to an extent, agreed with them. And when I spoke to them, they were quite firm about the fact that they would not themselves be able to participate in the conference because of their mental state. And I relate this story to you because of a particular reason, Kapil. कि इन लोगों ने ये बोला कि देखो हमारी एग्जाम्स तो सामने है, which is true. Their exam is a few days from now. हम लोग जानते हैं हम लोग पास नहीं करेंगे, हम लोग जस्टिस के लिए फाइट कर रहे हैं क्योंकि हम लोग और कुछ कर नहीं पा रहे. आंख बंद करते हैं घर में जाके तो लगता है कि ये सीनरी अपने सामने बार बार घूम के आ रही है. It's a traumatized population of people that we're talking about, and this fact that you mentioned कि देखो 3 साल के लिए आते हैं, पढ़ाई करते हैं, चले जाते हैं, इसको upset क्यों करेंगे? So you're absolutely right, bang on. But this incident probably was an exception to this general rule. It traumatized the population so much, it made them feel. तो आप देखो, मैं बोल रहा हूँ, मैं अपने आप को, I had a sense of ownership and responsibility in this. Think about the people who worked with her, did on-calls with her, maybe did night shifts with her.
True.
Think of their state of mind, especially if they knew things, know things which they wouldn't manage to talk about. Think about what they went through and how traumatized they must have been. So I think the fear factor still remains and is going to remain going forward. And one of the fights for justice that we talk about would be to try and make these institutions where we go and study and spend our best years of life to become free of this fear factor that seems inherent in the culture of these institutes.
Okay. So 2 things out of what you said. First of all, obviously, I understand कि NAPCON होने वाला था कोलकाता में because of all of this incident. You had this decision to shift out and all of us completely agree and understand, and now it has been shifted. So we all support you in that decision. Second is, ये जो आप threat culture की जो बात करें, fear culture, threat culture, is this something, according to your best knowledge, isolated only in the particular medical college, or you feel there are a lot of colleges in this part in East India which are involved?
So I wouldn't know about East India, Kapil, but let me speak about my state, the state of West Bengal. I think there's a lot of medical colleges. Maybe it was worst in Arjikar because of the principal involved who's got a track record which is very poor to say the least, and that's putting it very mildly. However, there are other medical colleges, and I think some of this, quite a bit of this, would have happened in other medical colleges, outskirts, other districts in Bengal. You have medical colleges, you have medical institutes where some of this would have been happening. So this is a big racket. You know, some of this racket belongs to North Bengal, where a lot of these perpetrators of the crime, a lot of people who've been arrested on charges of corruption are from that particular sector. So I don't think this is something, the threat culture that we talk about, the wrongdoings, the corruption that we talk about, ये खाली हम लोग आरजीकर की बात कर रहे हैं, ऐसा तो बिल्कुल नहीं है. The incident happened in Arjikar. The principal in question was probably one of the central figures in the crime that went around. But I think the tentacles of this, the roots of this, would be far more wide-reaching. It would probably have reached definitely through the state, but also beyond.
सर, अगर मैं एक सिंपल क्वेश्चन अगर मैं आपको पूछ सकता हूँ, आई एम श्योर दिस विल हैव अ लॉन्ग आंसर बिकॉज यू हैव बीन इन्वॉल्व्ड इन दिस केस इन मल्टीपल केसेस इन द प्रोटेस्ट एंड एवरीथिंग. इफ यू कुड जस्ट टेल मी कि क्या क्या इंसिडेंट्स आपने देखा है, हाउ यू हैव बीन अ पार्ट ऑफ दिस प्रोटेस्ट, द मीडिया बाइट्स एंड एवरीथिंग, इफ यू कुड जस्ट लेट मी नो.
So, Kapil, I'll maybe take a step back and I'll tell you why I'm taking a step back before I answer your question. तो मैं इसी शहर में पला बड़ा हुआ, यहाँ पे पढ़ाई की. I did my post-graduation, my MD in this city, and then I went to the UK. I trained there, then I was a consultant, and then I came back to the city. And when I came back to the city, I faced two questions from multiple people, both in the UK and in India. तो लोगों ने मुझे पूछा आप क्यों जा रहे हो, आपका इतना सिक्योर जॉब है, बढ़िया जॉब है इंग्लैंड में, और आप कलकत्ता क्यों जा रहे हो. You know, I came and joined Apollo, and at the time they interviewed me in London and they offered me a job in Chennai. And I came to Kolkata for a salary and a job profile which was far lower as compared to what I was being offered at Chennai. And I came back because I felt I belonged here. And because I belonged here and because I trained here, I felt I owed it to the city to give some of it back. ये मेरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी थी. तो मुझे वो लोग बोलते मम्मी पापा थे, तो वो तो है ज़रूर कि मम्मी पापा यहाँ पे थे, उनकी उम्र हो रही थी. So that was a part of the reason, but probably only a part of the reason. The other reason was that I owed it to the city, I owed it to the specialty to come back and serve the city, work in the city where I had been born, bred and trained. So I say this for a reason. तो जब ये हुआ ना, मुझे लगा कि क्या मैंने गलत किया वापस आके? Have I come back to a city and a state which is actually going in the wrong direction, a country which is going in the wrong direction? How can it be that such a brutal event happens within the safe haven, as we have discussed, of an institute, a hospital, where a girl is on call? And I felt that it was my responsibility to try and put together a movement where there were two aspects to this in my head. One, of course, was to try and obtain justice. And you have said rightly, justice delayed is justice denied, but we know that it will take time. It might take much lesser time as compared to the Nirbhaya case. Hopefully it will do. However, it will take more time. But as importantly was to try and find ways in which we could make our working environments more secure. We could root out this threat culture, जो अभी हम लोग बात कर रहे थे. We could make women safer in their workplace, and this is where we probably go outside medicine and think about all the women who have to work late at night, return home late at night. अगर आप अस्पताल के डिपार्टमेंट के अंदर इतना अनसेफ हो, आप रास्ते में एक टैक्सी में, एक उबेर में, एक ओला में कैसे सेफ हो सकते हो? So I think all of these went through my mind, and I thought that it was my bounden responsibility along with lots of others. I'm sure I was not an exception in this, and that's why the movement has moved forward the way it has. A lot of people thought that was our responsibility. So we wrote posts, we went out and did rallies, we were joined by thousands of people. We sat outside Shastra Bhavan, which is the official home of the Health Secretariat of Bengal. We went to Lal Bazaar. I was summoned to Lal Bazaar for writing posts which were thought to be anti-government. And believe me, Kapil, I have no political inclinations. I don't express any political inclinations. They're not in my head. Of course, I would think well about a particular politician and not so well about someone else. But when I did this movement, I did it because I thought this was right, not because there was some personal agenda that I had against the state or the central government or any other party, but I thought it was my bounden responsibility to do so. So we still continue to protest. We still continue to join together in my hospital, stand there at 2 p.m. and talk about Abhaya, talk about how far we have progressed and what we want, maybe sing a song in her memory and remembrance. And this will continue. And without going into the gaudy details of what else I have done, one is what I have done in the way of rallies, marches, writing, coming to meetings, going to various places, putting in social posts. But more importantly, what it is that has gone in my head in this entire period of time. And in my head, I feel that all of what we have done together, me as an individual and people as a community, has already made a difference. There people have developed a spine to stand up and protest against wrongdoing, something which has probably gone out of the window completely. ये जो हम लोगों की साहस होती है ना कि कुछ गलत हो रहा है, बिल्कुल गलत हो रहा है, हम लोग खड़े होके सोच बोले कि हाँ देखो गलत हो रहा है, ये जो साहस है ना, this movement for justice, whatever that word means, and maybe we'll discuss that in a moment, but whatever that word means, हम लोगों में ये साहस आ गया है कि हम लोग सीधा होके बोले कि ये गलत हो रहा है, ये नहीं होने देंगे, ये थ्रेट कल्चर है, ये गलत हो रहा है. तो ये जो साहस है, एटलीस्ट justice has been obtained to the extent that people have understood their rights, recognized they have rights, and stood up against powerful people and said कि ये आप गलत कर रहे हो.
करेक्ट.
और ये छोटी बात नहीं, ये काफी बड़ी बात है मेरे ख्याल
इट्स अ ह्यूज थिंग बिकॉज इसके पहले शायद से कभी हुआ ही नहीं था. जैसे आपने बोला था कि द डॉक्टर कम्युनिटी इन जनरल always is on the back foot, somewhere. So on behalf of so many people, so many doctors, I would really like to thank you because of all these steps that you've taken. And जैसे आपने बोला, शायद से you're not the only one. There are so many people, but
Absolutely.
I think Kolkata showed its true color, ये entire incident में.
So the positivity, Kapil, sorry I've interrupted.
Yeah.
We've talked about all the negative aspects of what has happened, and there's a lot of negativity. The city has been, like you said, grieving for the last 3 months. But the positive thing has been people coming together.
Correct.
You spoke about the resident doctors, we have spoken about senior doctors, we've talked about nurses, healthcare workers, we'll talk about the community as a whole. They have stood up together for justice and appealing against what has gone on in the state. And that, I think, is a huge achievement for people of the state. And I feel proud of my state and city, at least on this particular avenue.
Perfect. So I think आपने जो words अभी use किया ना, I just I was seeing the entire thing. I was trying to research when I come and interview you. 15th August specifically, आपने वापस एक Facebook post लिखा है. And again, like I mentioned previously, it's very uncommon for you to do this. And you have mentioned the exact same things, that you're so proud of the way people have stood. And remember, this is a people's movement. पहले हमको लगा था कि ये बहुत restricted है, सिर्फ respiratory, सिर्फ doctor, सिर्फ एक hospital, but this is a people's movement right now. And thank you so much to people like you, that we've propagated this. People's movement, say, if I could just ask you one question before I, get to other aspects also. Reclaim the night was something जो हम सब दूर बैठ के हम सिर्फ सुने थे, probably read about it, that's it. But what was Reclaim the Night movement and how did it go about?
So Reclaim the Night came about because there was one lady who said that the women folk of the city, of the state, would come forward the night for Abhaya, which was the night we've been speaking about, the night which went into the 9th of August, and show their protest, make it a safe haven for the women of the city and the state. And of course, there'll be men accompanying them, but it was a mass movement by women, for women, appealing about women's security. And रोंगटे खड़े हो जाते हैं सोचने से, आप अगर उस दिन रात को कलकत्ते में होते, you would have seen the amount of mass movement there was. And Reclaim the Night was a night that will be remembered by all for me for the rest of my life. But equally, the rallies that we have gone to, Kapil, जहाँ पे गए हैं, चले हैं, we cause inconvenience when we go on rallies, believe it. I mean, I'm sure you understand that. ट्रैफिक रुक जाती है, बसें रुक जाती हैं, लोगों को काम पे जाना होता है, उनका काम रुक जाता है. जब हम लोगों ने 2-4 बार ऐसा भी किया कि हम लोगों ने एक पार्शियल हॉल्टिंग ऑफ वर्क किया, नॉन इमरजेंसी सर्विसेज हम लोगों ने रोके, तो लोगों को तकलीफ होती है. बट आई again goosebumps when I speak about this. So I was walking by Alipur from our hospital up towards Woodlands. There were about 2,500 of us.
Wow.
The buses were waiting, the taxis were waiting. and you had little old ladies coming out of their buses, coming out of taxis, Ubers, standing and clapping and saying, "We want justice." You know, these are 80-year-old. There was a lady who was in a wheelchair on the pavement. She got the person who was pushing the wheelchair, probably her son, to get her into the rally for about 2 minutes. She went along with us and she said, tears in her eyes, tears in my eyes, that we also want justice. I have never in my lifetime seen something like this. It's unlikely I'll be there for long. But the fact that the state had stood up and appealed for justice was something which appealed to every individual, and they were happy, satisfied. And I use that word happy with intent. Happy that they were being inconvenienced for a cause which was close to their heart, which they felt strongly about.
I think hats off to all these people. West Bengal, I think, has led the way. They've led by example. And I hope such incidents don't happen in any state. But really, it is so nice to hear about all these stories. And I remember many Facebook page story dekha tha, there was a 98-year-old man who had also come in these rallies to support. So this is something brilliant, unprecedented. I don't think so any one of us thought that this would have been possible.
So my mom is 80, right? And she tells me that since the freedom movement, since the time of independence, Bharat Chodo, so Quit India movement, etc., there's never ever been a time, and even in those times, this mass movement coming together spontaneously in a movement where there is no self involved. And while you cannot have anything which is completely away from politics, but people did not bring their political hats into the movement, at least to start with.
Correct.
जो कि बहुत बड़ी बात है. So this is the people's movement, the mass movement about my profession, about someone who's from my specialty, where people have got together, supported healthcare workers, supported doctors, maybe supported their own cause to an extent in the same way, but felt about it and suffered some amount of inconvenience, but still gone along with the movement and still do, is something which is unprecedented, as you said, Kapil, and probably not something I'll see again in my lifetime.
I hope there is no incident so that we get to see. That is what I will look at it. But there's also one more thing. Remember, we are obviously in Kolkata, in Bengal, and holiday festivals, agar aap dekhoge, to Durga Puja is a huge thing in this part of the country. आप इंसिडेंट से देखो, द नंबर ऑफ हॉलीडेज बीच में जो है, आप इंडिपेंडेंस डे देखो, आप दिवाली देखो, नवरात्रि, दुर्गा पूजा, सो मेनी. Lekin despite all of this, despite the breaks and everything, but this movement is still strong. So that is a huge testament to the people of Bengal, that they've somehow, continued with this movement.
It is indeed, Kapil. And ये देखो आप, ये जो, in Dharmatala, there was this Dharna Manch where we had our young doctors fasting. And you actually thought of that as being one of the mandirs that you go to. So people, even when they went out in their new clothes to see the Durga Pratima, would actually go to Dharmatala, stand there, and think of this as being one of the areas of worship. There's a lot of people who actually did not visit any other mandap. They would actually go to the Dharna center, stand there in unity. I mean, these young guys are starving themselves, they are fasting. There's not a lot that you can go. But just to show unity, just to show that they are with these youngsters, you had people from every sphere of life just going and standing there for an hour, standing there, head down, trying to find out whether these youngsters were doing well, they were doing okay health-wise. I mean, there were apparently about 25 lakh footfalls, 25 lakh footfalls in the 3 days during Durga Puja at this Dharmatala Mandap.
Wow. Sir, if I may just, talk about this fast unto death, I have never seen this in a doctor movement. मैंने कभी भी नहीं देखा. I have seen this in political rallies. I think Anna Hazare, I think Arvind Kejriwal. But correct me if I'm wrong, probably this is the first time that this has happened in a doctor's movement. And really, मैं कुछ नाम लेना चाहता हूँ. And, Dr. Arnab, Dr. Tanaya Ghosh, Dr. Sayantani, there are so many of this. Dr. Snigdha. So many of y'all have led by example. Really, जैसे sir ने बोला, y'all are actually youngsters. लेकिन आज आप सभी senior doctors, faculties और लोगों को, you have actually showed what is resilience. And I completely agree with the people of Bengal, to consider this like a mandap to go and bow your head. So thank you so very much, guys. And, I hope that आपका ये जो sacrifice और जो fast है, it does not go to waste, and
Yeah.
we're all waiting for
Yeah.
justice.
Yeah. So most of these guys have actually been hospitalized. You understand that this was a fast which was done under CCTV coverage. So this was monitored. There were CCTVs and there were TV stations, sort of these mini vans that they have for TV. They were all stationed there, lights on their faces, interviews all the time. The nights there were people there. So they even rationed the amount of water that they took. They refused fruit juice, right? So they did not have fruit juice. And they got hospitalized. They went to ICU. They required IV fluids. There was someone who had an acute renal shutdown, which thankfully got better. So this has been, believe me, a movement by the juniors where the seniors like myself have happily followed their leadership. And the amount of bravery, the amount of intellect that they have shown in the movement through the Durga Puja times has been absolutely amazing. And like you, Kapil, salute to them, kudos to them. I have never ever heard of a movement where youngsters who have just entered into their postgraduate trainee or just completed it have led a movement of such magnitude.
Really, goosebumps.
Indeed.
And I think the future of medicine is in bright hands. That's all I can say. That's the conclusion for me. Sir, let me also talk about the media. Very often people say that media is a double-edged sword. कभी आपके साथ रहता है, कभी आपके against रहते हैं, and all of that. What do you think was the role of media in coverage of this entire incident until now? What do you think?
So I think when the movement was at its peak, and I think we are probably a little beneath the peak now. But when it was at its peak, I think there was a lot of media coverage. There were a couple of Bengali channels which would cover nothing other than the movement, and the other new bits of news would be covered in passing. The problem is that this fourth vertical that we all follow and which gives us information sometimes becomes a little biased, pro-government, anti-government. And we are talking about a movement where we are trying to keep away from politicization. So there was a lot of coverage, yes. There is much lesser coverage now. But I think the media deems certain things as being important, newsworthy, TRPs, etc. And there is something which they do out of social responsibility. And this balance, social responsibility versus TRP, and maybe somewhere in the equation, the politicization of the media, together decide how important a bit of news is.
Okay.
We have probably gone 2 rungs below, but one thing that I want to mention is sort of a continuation of the media story is that we felt a little disappointed, even let down by the lack of interest shown by the national media after the initial few days. So I think when we had the All India Institute, we had the other Delhi institutes, Mumbai institutes participating initially. And then the Supreme Court said, please go back to work. People went back to work. And when the doctors in other cities and states went back to work, the media shied away from the movement. So the power of the movement, the strength of the movement comes from numbers, Kapil. You know, so we talked about the numbers in the city, we talked about numbers in the state. But imagine we are a country of 145 crores. If we had a lot of the country along with us, the power of the movement probably would have been greater, could have been better. So I have no complaints about the local media. I have seen that there is always going to be a bias, and this is not just media in Bengal or India, it's media throughout the world.
Okay.
However, I think we could have done a little better than what we did. Having said that, there were certain individuals, and I won't take names because that would be out of place, but there were certain people in the national media who kept it in the news and keep doing news items on it.
Okay.
I think what we need as we go forward in the movement is a bit more of support. People like yourself. So you've made your way up down here to Kolkata. You ask me questions. So we need a bit more of visibility of this movement throughout the country. A bit more of support from healthcare workers throughout the country if we are to take this movement forward to its natural fruition.
Okay, perfect. Kahanaka, what I was also trying to get at is, do you feel that this movement has been reduced by certain sections of the media when they go to, they restrict this movement only in the studios, and then you've got these inconclusive debates, between some political party or something like that. And I'm using the word, stressing on the word inconclusive. It's got nothing to do, it's got bearing no result. But do you think Kahanaka ye bhi ho gaya ye movement ke saath?
हाँ, तो ये मूवमेंट के साथ तो हुआ कपिल, बट इक्वली आई थिंक एनी इशू, you know, these sort of sitting across the table debates that we have, people shouting, there's someone who acts as a referee. Like you said, they are inconsequential because more than leading people in a direction, they confuse people.
Correct.
You know, because these are seasoned politicians who are debating across the table and each put their points forward equally strongly. And at the end of the day, the person either develops a bias or goes home confused that this is probably not something which is my cup of tea, it's beyond my understanding.
Correct.
And I think that's not just true with the Abhaya issue. I think it's true for multiple issues throughout the country. And there has to be a way in which we have debates. Debates are healthy, but there's a message that comes across from the debate which the audience can take home with it. You know, so otherwise it just confuses people. I don't think what they're worth, and I agree with you that it's inconclusive.
So there should just be more of constructive debates rather than planned confusion is what. Okay, perfect. Sir, I would just like to now come to the conclusion of the podcast. There's always with every issue, not only this issue, जैसा आपने बोला, बहुत सारे issues में you get a lot of WhatsApp ज्ञान, you know, अलग अलग लोग discuss करते हैं और you know बहुत constructive होता है, कुछ नहीं होता है. There are 5 such discussions, and I would like to put these statements or these questions in front of you, and I want your opinion on it. ठीक है? So the first is female resident doctors should not do night duties. What is your opinion?
So I'll say this strongly at the expense of upsetting people. I think that's a foolhardy statement. You know, doctors are doctors at the end of the day. It doesn't matter whether it's a man or it's a woman. And if you don't allow women to do night shifts, ladies to do night shifts, you're actually depriving them of a part of their career. You're saying that you're a lesser mortal, your safety. So rather than trying to address the issue of safety, you're locking the lady up at home and saying, that's your safe haven. If you come out, you subject yourself to lack of security rather than securing the city and the state. So like I said, I think I would strongly disagree. And again, strongly probably is a mild word here. I think we need to sit up and make our streets, our hospitals, our institutes secure rather than saying, you stay locked at home, the city will stay the way it is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for making that statement. Actually, you know, a lot of female resident doctors will actually enjoy this and there's a correct way, जैसे आपने बताया. Second, मेरा जो statement है, there should compulsorily be females in administrative posts and positions of authority in medical colleges. What is your opinion?
I think having women in various sectors is now mandated and thought to be compulsory. And I don't think institutional boards, etc., should be any exception. However, having said that, Kapil, I think you have men of various sorts and you have women of various sorts. So the important thing when you have a board is individuals, men or women, who think about either sex, either gender, rather than thinking that it's a woman who would always think more about women and it will be men who would think exclusively about men. If you have people of this genre all the way through, then you have to make it 50-50. You know, you have to have, rather than one woman, if it's a board of 7 people, you probably need to have, or maybe we'll make it simpler rather than an odd number. So if you have 8 people, then you have to have 4 and 4 of men and women. So I think it's the mindset needs to change. It needs to be inclusive. You need to think about women. You need to think of people who are elderly, aging. You have to think of people who have some health issue which is challenging for them. You need to think about various sections of the society rather than pointing fingers and saying, okay, I have ticked a box. There is a woman here. Hence, the woman issue is addressed. It is not.
Okay, got it.
Having a woman is important, yes, but making sure that that woman is addressing the women-related issue and so are the men, looking at both men and women, is important when you build up any board or group of people who work together towards an end.
Got it. My third statement to you is, and I mentioned about this before, resident doctors, whether fortunately or unfortunately, are a migratory population. Do you think during their residency, they need better representation for their needs?
So absolutely do. So that's a strong yes, Kapil. I think You need to have resident doctors who think about their own population as one inclusive community, being on boards where their issues are being addressed. And this is across government, private institutes, everywhere. You should have resident doctors as parts of committees where issues related to resident doctors are being addressed.
Okay.
And they need to have a fair representation there. And they just don't need to be there. They need to be heard. They need to have the power to be heard in the decision making process when decisions are being made about them.
Okay. So it's a strong yes from you. Okay. My fourth point is, suppose today some magical event happens and you are in charge of ensuring women's safety. Not only doctors, all women, healthcare workers, nurses across medical colleges. What steps will you take to ensure that they are all safe?
I think the first thing that is important, both for the government and private institutes, more for the government, less for the private, is seclusion of these units and improving safety. You have government institutes now, hospitals, where you can actually walk in. You can walk into every bit of the hospital without anyone. You might have a security who's sleeping at the door. It doesn't make any difference. You can walk through anywhere. You need to have secure doors. You need to have passcodes. You need to have a card which you swipe to get in through the door. So I think the security of the unit is important. We'll not talk about crooks like Sanjay, but people generally come to hospitals when their mental state is fragile. And they want to put the onus, the culpability of whatever happens to their family members on the doctor. So it's the fragility of their mental state where certain people behave with aggression, undue aggression to people. And while we appreciate that and the healthcare community is responsible for trying to support these people, their physical safety should also be very, very important. And for that, you need some form of barrier where you can be secure in your own haven. The on-call rooms need to be secure. You have to have on-call rooms for women which are secure. You need to have an attached toilet. There needs to be a lock and a bolt to that door. People can only enter into that room when there's a particular reason to do so. There needs to be CCTVs installed everywhere. So in this particular condition, you had CCTVs in the corridor, but you did not have CCTV within the seminar room where this lady was. So you need to have CCTVs wherever you cannot have CCTVs within the room where a doctor is sleeping. That's not possible. But in a seminar room, in corridors, proper coverage, ensuring that these CCTVs work is important. Having a good security backup at the door, even after all these boxes have been ticked, the swipe card, etc. All of that happens. In spite of that, having security, good quality security, having police, the police gumti, the thana there within the hospital, people who are active, doing stuff, going around the hospital, making the rounds is of extreme importance.
Okay.
For psychiatrists in the UK where I worked, you would actually have a buzzer. So if you activated that buzzer when there's a physical threat, it goes and rings in the nearest police station. So something of that nature in areas where events like this happen would be something which is useful to men and women. We talk about women being more fragile, which is true. But it's not as if men doctors cannot be beaten up.
Yeah.
So, safety and security for everyone is important. And I think these are things that need to be looked into. I do it, someone else does it, we do it as a group, which is most likely.
Okay.
I think these are issues that need to be addressed throughout the country and, of course, the city of Kolkata.
Perfect. And my last question to you is, it's about the word justice. I personally feel justice is a very relative term. Probably my thinking about justice will be different, your thinking will be different. I want to know what is, in your opinion, what should be justice for Abhaya?
So I started off saying this, and let me first say that I completely agree with you. I think justice is a relative. And you said your concept of justice and my concept of justice are important. I would put it one step further and say, in my own head, what I thought was justice 3 months ago and what I think of as justice today has been a transient, it's been a changing journey. It's not really remained the same. So as of today, I feel there are two sections to the justice part. One is the case that CBI is investigating. I want, all of us want, the country wants that people who committed the heinous crime, but equally people who planned it, people who executed it together, people who wiped the evidence away are equally culpable as the person who hands on did it.
Yes.
If there was one person, so I think all of these need to be investigated in detail. Why there needed to be such a cover up needs to be investigated, and people should achieve justice. So that's one part of justice, and CBI is looking at it. The Sessions Court, the High Court, the Supreme Court is monitoring the investigation. I'm sure we will have justice. How far up we'll go up this ladder in achieving justice is anyone's guess, but I'm hopeful that a large chunk of justice in this area would be achieved. That's one section.
Okay.
But as important, I talked about my changing definition of justice. So I think what we want to achieve, and we've talked about this in the course of this podcast a few times now, is to try and prevent another Abhaya happening in
Got
the
it.
city, in the state, in the country, across borders. We need to make sure that we have a system in place where there isn't a threat culture, where people can work with harmony, where seniors and juniors join hands together, where there isn't corruption in the form that we see today in Arjikar and maybe other hospitals in the city. That culture goes, people are safe at their working place, they can execute what they do. What people get in the way of promotions, transfers, etc., are what they deserve. You understand that when you're trying to promote someone for the wrong reasons, you're obviously depriving someone who is more eligible to get that particular award or promotion. So all of these need to change, Kapil, if we are to complete this cycle of justice that we spoke about just now.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think I couldn't have put it much better, but these are lovely words. And thank you so much, Dr. Rajadhar sir. We know you're a very busy man. You're coming straight from a meeting. Thank you so much for removing time, coming, and those words of wisdom, on this podcast. And I'm sure all of us really enjoyed it. It was an honor and privilege for me to have you as a guest on my podcast.
Thank you, Kapil. And I know how much of effort you've made to actually come over from Mumbai, come to Kolkata, do this interview. And the passion with which you do it, I think is exemplary. And I think we need more people to promote consciousness, of course, in this area, but various other areas of healthcare where we need support and we need improvement. So thank you for being here and coming and talking to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I don't think so. I have words actually. And मैं usually ये position में नहीं रहता हूँ. I think Dr. Rajadhar has made a perfect case. He just took us through the entire case of this Arjikar incident, what all went behind the scenes, what all has happened. And remember, we are still waiting for justice. It was really heartening to hear how the people of Kolkata, the people of West Bengal, have converted this into a people's movement. It's not only restricted to doctors, but all of y'all took part in this, made this into a success. Fingers crossed, justice जल्द ही जल्द मिलेगा. And again, fingers crossed, ऐसा incident कोई भी female पे हमारी country में या तो पूरी world में, not only doctors, लेकिन कोई भी female में नहीं होना चाहिए. I hope all of you also felt the passion and the emotion that this incident brought back. And you could hear the passion in Dr. Rajadhar's voice. Please follow, like, subscribe, and share my channel, which is DTalks with Dr. Kapil. Stay tuned. We'll be getting many such more speakers and ensure that you all have the up-to-date information. Thank you.